Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Play Chaos Head. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and give a quick mention that I have made some more adjustments yet again to my audio filters in OBS, namely the EQ filter. And so please, if you could, leave a comment letting me know what you think about this, think about how the audio sounds, because it is somewhat important to me what you all think about the audio quality, so that I can potentially make further adjustments if need be. But I do find that personally, based off my testing, I think this sounds a little bit better than the previous settings. Let's go ahead and continue. To think that the three investigative teams would actually be combined into one. Ben Yasuji ruminated bitterly over this as he gazed out upon the detectives gathered in the Shibuya Police Department's large conference room. The Inokashira-lined Shibuya Station public bathroom homicide, or as the media called it with amusement, the Vampire House case, had led to a truly grave personnel shortage. With three brutal murder cases having occurred in the same jurisdiction and in close succession, the chances of them all being the work of the same criminal were at last growing higher. Some argue that the Cornelius Tower Group suicide case should be left to the juvenile division, but due to how the media treated it as part of New Gen, there was the possibility that the police would become the targets of criticism if they made it an exception. And so it was perhaps natural that the central office had selected the one choice remaining to them. And so it was perhaps natural that the central office had selected the one choice remaining to them, which was to combine the various investigation headquarters. At the moment, as part of the integration process, the sequential New Gen cases were being re-examined one by one. The screen at the head of the conference room reflected a series of photographs of the crime scenes. Sua had been singled out to explain everything. Yesterday, the two of them had stayed up all night putting their heads together over documents related to the four cases. Good work, Ben muttered internally, chin propped up on his hands.
コーネリアスタワー集団投身自殺事件の発生は9月7日っす。ニュージェネとマスコミが故障している4つの事件の中では一番最初に発生してます。午後11時半頃、渋谷コーネリアスタワー屋上のヘリポートから男女5人が転落、全員死亡しました。
Well, no shit, all of them died. They fell off of a freaking tower.
5人は全員未成年の高校生。男が3人、女が2人。ただし5人のうち男女1人ずつだけが同じ学校なだけで、それ以外の3人はいずれも別の学校でした。5人それぞれの爪の間にわずかな肉片が残っており、手のひらに引っかき傷があったことが司法解剖で判明しました。
And of course, if they were holding hands, you could reasonably argue that they scratched each other's palms as they fell.
そこから5人は互いに手をつないだ状態で転落したと推測されます。
Yeah.
屋上には遺書らしきものはなし。被害者5人は学校帰りに待ち合わせてコーネリアスタワーへ向かったようです。なお、事件性があることを示す根拠としては、コーネリアスタワー屋上が関係者以外立ち入り禁止であったことが挙げられます。事件があった時間、屋上への扉は施錠されており、その扉のドアノブに被害者5人の指紋は付着してませんでした。また、5人の遺品からも扉の鍵は見つかっていません。
Which, if anything, opens up the possibility that a staff member potentially opened it up for them.
このことから、被害者以外の第三者が事件前後にその現場にいた可能性があります。その第三者が扉の鍵を持っており、事件前あるいは事件後に鍵を閉めて立ち去ったという線で捜査を続けてます。コーネリアスタワーのホテル従業員全員への聞き取り調査は終了。ほぼ全員にアリバイがありました。今はタワーに入っている企業の社員に話を聞いているところです。被害者たち5人には今のところ自殺する理由は見つかっていません。 家族、友人、学校の教師など5人中4人の関係者が口を揃えて自殺する理由などないと断言しています。
The slide changed, switching to the second case, the Shibuya Station College student fetus homicide.
続いて通称妊娠男事件についてですが、事件発生は9月19日、通称集団ダイブ事件から12日後、第一発見者は現場近くのカラオケ店店員、遺体発見は午前5時前後、被害者は渋谷区在住の大学3年生近衛千鶴夫21歳。発見された時にはすでに死亡してました。死亡推定時刻は遺体発見の約4時間前、19日の午前1時頃です。遺体は腹部が不自然に大きく膨れ上がっており、中から胎児が発見されました。司法解剖の結果、被害者は生きたまま腹部を何者かに切開され、胃の中に胎児を入れられたようです。胎児はすでにその時点で亡くなっていたと思われます。被害者が死亡したのは腹部を縫合された後、縫合した部分をかきむしったり、縫合糸を一部引きちぎった形跡が見られました。胎児は妊娠8ヶ月ぐらいの状態で、母親の体から帝王切開で取り上げられたと考えられます。胎児の母親については今のところ見つかってません。その生死についても不明です。 DNA 鑑定の結果、胎児と被害者には血縁関係はありませんでした。ちなみに胎児の血液型は B 型、被害者の血液型は A 型です。
Suwa took a breath. He appeared to have grown wary from talking continuously, not to mention the fact that he must have been nervous at speaking in front of so many of his superiors.
次に第3の事件、丸山町貼り付け殺人事件です。
After a second, the displayed slide changed to a photo of the staking crime scene.
これが現場写真です。事件発生は9月29日。被害者は太田久志56歳、都東大学教授。第一発見者は現場のすぐ近くのアパートに住む男性。被害者の死因は絞殺でした。殺害された後で10本程度の釘を使って貼り付けにされていました。見ての通り、遺体には外傷はほとんどありません。釘についても貼り付けは一部肉体を貫通しているものもありましたが、基本的には衣服を通して貼り付けられている状態です。マスコミでは貼り付け、血の惨劇などと謳われてますが、出血は全くなし。釘はドイツのクロイツナーゲル社が販売している特徴的な長い十字架のような杭です。犯人が十字架型をあえて選んだということから、宗教的な側面からも捜査を進めてます。事件の起きた21時から21時半の間に、現場周辺で壁に杭を打ち付ける音が数十分続いていたという証言が複数得られました。被害者の死亡推定時刻がほぼそれと同じ時間であることから、おそらく被害者は現場かそのすぐ近くで殺害されたと思われます。また信憑性は怪しいですが、事件現場で私立水明学園の女生徒を見たという証言も上がってます。最後に井の頭線渋谷駅トイレ殺人事件、通称ヴァンパイア事件です。事件発生は10月10日、遺体発見は午前5時半ごろ。被害者の身元は今のところ不明。身元を示すような遺留品は一切ありませんでした。死亡推定時刻は前日の午前10時から午後6時の間。
We'll just let Suwa do all the talking for us this part, I guess.
遺体の血液は全て抜かれており、まるでミイラのような状態で放置されていました。
And for whatever reason, he was abandoned in a mummy-like state, and for whatever reason, his skin turned green.
ご存知の通り、この写真が何者かによって撮影され、遺体発見より15分ほど前にインターネットのオークションに出品されており、
As he listened to Yusua's explanation, Van clicked his tongue. This suggested that death was becoming something of a fashion. And we're just gonna ignore the green skin. Chapter 4, D-Sword. The Science City was a pair of buildings located to the south side of Shibuya's pedestrian scramble. There was a small plaza at the East Tower's first floor entrance, which neighbored the station, and while it may not have been as popular as the area by the statue of Hachiko, people often use it as a meeting spot. Even now, 10 or so people were glaring at their cell phones while waiting for some appointed time. Only one among them wore a strangely harsh expression as she stood in place. She was a high school student, Aoi Senna. From the descending escalator that came down from the Inokashira line station, which was found on the second floor of Science City, she leaned against a white column nearby it and scrupulously scanned the area. Yet, for some reason, and never mind the season, she was nibbling on a popsicle, which completely contrasted with the sharpness of her gaze, making her appear intensely amusing. In fact, she was not waiting for anyone, but instead she was quietly observing the people going to and fro. From right where she stood, one could see all the way to the Jumbotron located by the Scramble Crossing. A famous singer's PV video was slowly drifting there. On the lower portion of the screen, information about the so-called new-gen cases ran in a continuous ribbon. There wasn't a day without new-gen related news. TV, newspapers, the internet, weekly publications, even the Jumbotrons along the street, and electric sports scoreboards. Senna had absolutely no interest in those sources of information, but walk around Shibuya and one would often pass people talking about such topics. Whose eyes are those eyes? Over the past few days, she had begun to spot people with those words printed on the front of their t-shirts. In Shibuya, the phrase had become wildly popular as an underground meme, and was beginning to develop legs of its own. People on the streets spoke, smiling, of how related goods were selling pretty well at Harajuku's souvenir shops, providing proof positive that human beings have zero interest in anyone besides themselves. Senna snorted quietly, as though to show her contempt, finished the last mouthful of her popsicle, and lightly closed her eyes without changing her severe expression. She listened closely to the noise of the city. A wide range of noises overflowed through the Sunday Plaza. The rumble of trains reaching the platform, taxis honking, people chatting as they walked, background music leaking from the Jumbotron and from inside shops, the announcement from the escalator explaining how to ride it safely. The sounds never died out. Before one ended, the next would manifest, and they went on to play a multi-layered and discordant noise. In the midst of that noise, Senna only paid attention to people's voices. Her brain blocked out all other sounds, and she came to hear their words clearly.
結局全部同じ犯人なのかな。
違うってニュースで言ってたぞ。手口が違いすぎるって。
なんとかっつうバンドの歌詞と一緒。
おめえファンタズムなもんな。
お前あのバンド好きなの？
よくねえよ。私あの曲の歌詞にマジ共感したんだけど。
今時ファンタズム知らないなんてさ。
じゃあ CD 貸せよ。
マジ遅れてるよな。
ほらこれ見てくれよ。
何これ超ウケるんだけど。
この前買ってきた。
これ普通に売ってたんだな。超ウケる。マジで着てるやつ初めて見た。
自分で買ってこい。
でもあれじゃね、これってニュージェネの犯人に
俺の
殺して
顔がニュー
くださいって
スで全
アピールして
国に流れ
るようなもんじゃん。
るかもな。俺もいよいよ全国デビューか。
最近渋谷超怖くない？怖い
マジで
犯人
でも
だったら
一人やってね
えよ。そういう噂は僕に殺される可能性低いな。
おじさん
同じあのキモい男とかだけ殺してほしいよね。
私マジ応援する。
Well, that definitely was peaking the game audio in OBS. Senna gave a small click of her tongue. She soon ceased listening. She hadn't found anything worthwhile in any of the noise. Ultimately, noise was no more than noise.
この視線の感覚。気のせいか。
She looked around one more time. Since some time before, she had felt a horror akin to having cold fingers caress her back. A gaze thrown at her by someone unknown. But she couldn't seek out its true form. Senna pushed herself away from the pillar against which she was leaning. And then, as if she had only just remembered it, stared down at the popsicle stick remaining in her hand.
外れか。
Knitting her eyebrows as if her mood was growing worse and worse, she quickly walked off toward the station plaza.
あの空はどうしてあんなに泣きたくなるくらい青いのかな。
Because someone wished so.
私は望んでない。
I wished for it. Because this place is your imagined world, and at the same time, it's also mine.
ねえ、あの空はどこにあるの？
Anywhere you wish it to be.
望んでいいの？
Okay, well.
朝だよー。ほら起きて、起きなさい。
That was kind of a short section of the chapter. Sarah was calling me. Borachu was great yesterday. Sarah played a huge role, and there'd been a sexy kissing scene. The Sakuga quality was way up there too.
起きたらおはようのキスしてあげるからさ。って私何言ってんだろ。バカバカ、今の忘れて。
Sarah was calling me. Plus, with her saying such moey things to me, I couldn't avoid getting up. I peeled off the sheets covering me, groaned, and rose from the sofa.
ちょっといつまで寝てるんさ、このボケナス。こうなったら私のサムライコンデンサでぶん殴って起こし。
When I switched off the alarm clock, Sarah's voice got cut off in the middle of resounding through my room.
おはよう、セーラ。
My Sarah voice clock came in quite handy. If I didn't turn it off, her voice would get louder and louder before finally turning into a meaningless buzzer. Because I wanted to greet the morning after having been woken up by Sarah, I had trained myself to hit the switch before the buzzer started ringing. Up until now, I'd only failed at it twice. It was so... No. It was so easier to wake up with Sarah's help. It was so much easier. Or it was so easy. You're either missing a word or it's not supposed to be easier, but just easy. Whatever. Moving on. No, in actuality, I usually felt pretty awful from playing games till dawn or from how uncomfortable the sofa was, but being woken up by Sarah made it much less painful. I had school today. Since I'd skipped a day last week, my minimum attendance shift chart was starting to get a little warped. It would have been okay for me to go only twice this week, but now I was compelled to be at school 3 times in order to make up for the gap. I didn't want to go, but it'd be bad if I didn't. If I stayed home any more than this, I wouldn't be able to graduate. Not that failing to graduate would change anything about me. I had dreamt of Rimi. It was an odd dream. It seemed terribly nostalgic. It seemed terribly lonely. It seemed terribly sad. And it seemed terribly distant. Would Rimi come to school today? I had constantly kept thinking about what had happened the day before yesterday. I thought about it on and on, to the point of neglecting ESO. Not about Shogun having appeared or the illusion of everyone disappearing from Shibuya. I didn't attach tremendous significance to those things. Those must have been my delusions. I certainly couldn't believe Shogun was an old man like that, and thinking back over it, there were simply too many impossibilities involved in people vanishing from Shibuya. It had been a delusion that practically felt... No. It had been a delusion that particularly felt real. It had been a delusion that felt particularly real. But I was ashamed of myself for being so quick to believe in a situation so far removed from reality. More than any of that, Rimi, the girl I had called a demon until very recently. My memories of being in that place were surreal and malleable, as in a dream, and the one thing I still recalled clearly was the feeling of Rimi embracing me. If she hadn't done that for me, I might have become deranged and lost sight of myself. Why had Rimi saved me? I wonder if it was because, as she said, we were friends. I had not a single memory of things like her. I had not a single memory of Things like her being in my class since freshman year, or of us going to a movie with Misumi. But the attitude with which she made contact with me was clearly one of a close friend. Rimi had been a little close to crying when she held me. At the very least, I didn't think it was an act. She was the first girl to ever worry about and cry over a gross otaku like me. When she acted like that toward me, it instantly blew away all my previous dread and suspicion. More than that, it made me feel like I was on the verge of falling for her. No, but as you might expect, I was keeping myself carefully reined in. Confusion took up most of the space in my heart. How should I react around Rimi from now on? Is Rimi my ally or my enemy? Is Rimi the new-gen criminal? It is a fact that she had saved me, but it is also a fact that I had seen her standing still, drenched in blood at the scene of the staking. I stopped by Shuto Park on the way to school. After what had happened with Yua, I had given up my custom of eating breakfast here before heading to school. It didn't feel so pleasant when I thought that Yua might be watching me from somewhere. And if she came over to talk to me, she'd regurgitate her annoying, crazy conspiracy theories at me again. I couldn't afford to spend any time around her. Yua is Rimi's subordinate. Maybe I'd been wrong in believing that deduction of mine for so long. But that didn't mean Yua wasn't my enemy. There remained the possibility that Shogun was the last boss and Yua worked under him. In any case, it would be better to stay away from her. Except today, I had somehow ended up coming here. I carefully studied my surroundings to verify that Yua wasn't there, then slowly lowered myself onto my usual bench. I cast my eyes toward the pond while stuffing my cheeks with the chocolate pastry I'd bought at a convenience store earlier. There was little wind, and the surface of the water remained idyllic. Once in a while, I saw koi-like fish slide through the cloudy water. Today, rarely enough, there were no other people in the park. It was a very quiet space. As my gaze swam about the park, what I thought of was, predictably enough, Rimi. To be honest, going to school was a bother, knowing I would have no choice but to see her. For that, I went here just to buy myself some time. I felt like I'd said all kinds of harsh things to her. Yet Rimi had kept smiling and continued treating me kindly. If I went to school now, she would surely start talking to me again, the same as before. Smiling, acting as though what had happened in front of the 107 building didn't bother her in the slightest, calling out to me as my friend. Somehow, that eternally cheerful demeanor of hers depressed me a little. But she also had an atmosphere with her that made me think, maybe, if I stayed with her, I would start feeling brighter as well. With what kind of expression should I go meet her? I definitely didn't think of Rimi as a demon anymore, but I didn't think of her as a friend either. Misumi had said that Rimi and I had got along well as classmates for the past year and a half, but I had no memory of anything of the sort. Perhaps something was going wrong with the person behind me after all. But was it possible for my memories of Rimi to disappear like that, as if they had been pinpointed? I hunched over even further upon entering the school building. Following my usual principle of getting by at school, I walked slowly along the edge of the hallway as I headed for the stairs. My class was on the 3rd floor. It was quite a pain in the neck to climb up there, if only there was an escalator, I thought. Having come to the foot of the stairs, I spotted a girl ahead of me, swaying as she climbed up. She dragged her right foot a little as she walked. Maybe she twisted it. Her small body wavered from side to side. She seemed awfully precarious. As the other students steadily caught up with her and passed her on both sides, she climbed up slowly, literally one step at a time. Looking at her from below, it seemed like her panties would start showing any moment now. Crap. At this rate, I'd end up as a peeping Tom. I didn't want people to call me Mirror Man. When that occurred to me, and I stepped toward the stairs to go past her, right then, the girl caught her toes on the edge of the stairs and suddenly wobbled. as she came tumbling down with such momentum that it seemed like I'd hear a bang-type sound effect. Luckily, she stopped on a landing, so she hadn't fallen all the way down the stairs, but she remained on her knees as though she was in pain, and she didn't move for some time. Was this a flag emergence event? No, of course it wasn't. Even if it was, I wouldn't be able to bring myself to speak to her. Which is why I hastily slipped past her. Sorry, but get help from a third-dimension loving womanizer like Misumi, okay? Please, don't seek anything from me. But she stayed curled up so motionlessly, I started to get a tad concerned. After getting halfway up the stairs, I turned around quietly to see how she was doing. She was clutching the railing and trying her hardest to stand up. Her knees were knocking like those of a newborn deer. Blood oozed from her knee. I wondered if she had scraped it.
Huh?
That face. I'd seen it before. Wasn't she the girl who transferred to my class last week? Her name was... what was it again? I couldn't remember. On top of that, she was crying. Did it hurt that badly? She'd fallen pretty flashily, but it hadn't looked like a big enough impact to merit crying. Nobody attempted to offer her a hand. Having barely managed to stand up, she hunched forward to peek at her knee. Apparently, she was checking the condition of her injury. The transfer student wiped her eyes. She had set her bag down and began rummaging around inside it. What could she be searching for, I thought to myself. All of a sudden, she pulled her hand triumphantly out of her bag and hoisted it above her head. Her fingers were clutching a band-aid. Our eyes met. The transfer student's cheeks went red, and she hung her head. Well, for the time being, she seemed to be alright, and even if I didn't stay and watch her, she'd be okay. Reaching that conclusion, I hastily went to the classroom. I lowered my head as I always did, fixing my gaze on the ends of my toes. I silently took my seat. Come to think of it, I seem to remember that transfer student saying something to me on the day she transferred in. Something about being glad we were in the same class. Rimi had soon made me forget all about it, but I wondered what those words had meant.
Yo, Taku.
As always, Misumi was calling me. Maybe the truth was that he didn't have any friends besides me. At least the way he always started talking to me, and only me, was sufficient to give me some doubts.
聞いてくれよ。昨日さ、怪しいおっさん2人が校長室に入ってくのを見たんだ。
は？
で、俺とリミトでこっそり盗み聞きしてみたら、びっくりしたぜ。その2人、刑事だったんだぜ。
え？
Detectives?
なんか深刻そうに全校生徒の名簿とか見ててよ。もしかしてニュージェネと関係あんのかな？
Perhaps it meant the real New Gen criminal was a student at the school. No matter what, all I kept thinking of was Rimi's face.
なあ、盗み聞きしてたら見事にバレちゃったんだけどね。
I jumped. Speak of the devil, or whatever they say at times like this. When I heard Rimi's voice burst in on us, I felt my heart rate leap. I couldn't look up. I was tense, and it was an utterly different kind of tension from what I had felt up until last week.
あれはお前がドア勝手に開けたせいだぞ。分かってんのか？
しょうがないでしょ。本物の刑事さんって見るの初めてだったからちょっと興奮しちゃってつい。
何をどうやったらついドアを開けるんだよ。おかげで俺らまで刑事から話を聞かれる羽目になったんだからな。
大臣ってば刑事さんに聞かれちゃまずいことでもあったの？
そういうお前はどうなんだ？
さあね。
Misumi and Rimi sandwiched my desk as they carried on their conversation. They disregarded my existence. But to be honest, I liked it better that way. I wasn't confident that I would be able to say anything back if Rimi did talk to me. I'd anticipated the chime ringing without either of them saying anything to me, but then I flicked a look at the clock. There was still 5 minutes till the warning bell.
そういやタク、ここに来る途中で梢ちゃん見なかったか？
Kozue? Who?
ああ、そっか。どうせお前のことだから覚えてねえとは思ったけど、マジでそうだったんだな。先週転校してきた子のことだよ。折原梢ちゃん。
Oh, so that transfer student was called Orihara Kozu.
階段で
階段？
見た。
お、そっか。じゃあもうすぐ来るな。
Misumi's voice was brimming with enthusiasm. I hadn't seen him act this lively since a few days ago when he found out that Fess was a girl from the class next door. In short, I had never seen him put much effort into anything unrelated to girls. Now that he mentioned it, I had also seen him hitting on her last week, pretty much as soon as she arrived. He really was indomitable. Way to go. Never mind the fact that you have a girlfriend.
なあ、梢ちゃんってマジ可愛いと思わねえ？
You sure ask me things I find hard to answer. I nodded ambiguously. Apparently, he took it as a sign of agreement.
太郎！俺一目で気に入っちまったよ。なんか守ってやりたくなるんだよな。男子みんなも同じ意見だよ。どいつも可愛いって言ってんだ。けどよ、女子の間じゃあんま評判良くねえんだよな。
Well, no shit. If all the guys suddenly have the hots for the transfer student, of course the girls that are in that class are not going to think highly of the transfer student. Doesn't come as a surprise, now does it?
まだ転校してきたばっかだぜ。それなのに早くもうざいみてえな意見まで出てきてんだよ。
They're fucking jealous. It's that simple. It is that simple.
このクラスの女子って性格悪いやつ多すぎだ。
それって大臣のせいじゃないの？だいたいそのうざいって言ったのどうせ大臣の彼女でしょ？
ああ、そうだけど。
そりゃあ彼女にしてみればうざいに決まってるよ。自分の彼氏が目の前で折原さんを口説きに行っちゃってたらさ、私でさえよく喧嘩売られるんだから、大輔君に近寄らないでって。しかも一人じゃなくて何人かから言われた。
マジ？
自覚なしか。少しは反省したら？
いやー、モテる男は辛いぜ。
Can someone push him out a window?
これだよ。さすが女の敵。もう私フォローしてあげないからね。あ、折原さん来た。
なんか怪我してるみたいじゃね？
ほんとだ。どうしたんだろう。
That was what she'd gotten when she tripped on the stairs earlier. Of course, I didn't feel like telling those two about it. For now, at any rate, I wanted to avoid talking to Rimi as much as I could.
俺、ちょっと言ってくれ。
Oh boy. Misumi dashed up to the transfer student. Thanks to his departure, Rimi was the only person left nearby my seat. Ah, please, don't leave me, Misumi. And now we get awkward. My timer actually would have gone off a couple of minutes ago, but I did cancel it since it was getting close, and I kind of wanted to just not have it go off. So we're gonna go ahead and I think end here. Next part, we will make our delusion decision here, and we will continue on from here. But before we leave, do want to go ahead and give a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon and a Discord. You can find links to those down below in the description. For the Discord, that is my go-to place for posting about channel happenings, so I do highly recommend that you join it. If you want to be able to stay updated on interruptions in my recording schedule, interruptions to my streaming schedule. I was about to say screaming, I don't know why. Streaming schedule. And just any other potential issues that would get in the way of content on the channel. And as for the Patreon, that is, in my opinion, the easiest way to support the channel. If you find yourself enjoying the content, for as little as $1 a month, you can go ahead and get early access to all of my new videos. How much that early access varies a little bit. I typically would upload my videos Friday, Saturday, and then I would post onto the Patreon, which admittedly I haven't really updated in like a month or two now because I don't have any, so not really encouraged to go and keep it up to date. But assuming I had patrons, they would end up getting the links Saturday, Sunday. So depending on the series, it's as little as 24 hours of early access to as much as, I guess 72 hours, something like that, depending on the series in question and what day of the week the videos for that series go up. But yeah, so that'll be it for this part. Like I said, I will see you all next time, but until then, goodbye and farewell.